Okay, so it's streaming on YouTube now, Elena. I think that in 30 seconds you can go live, yeah?
Yes.
Sure. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. A very good morning, afternoon, or evening, depending on which part of the world you're joining us from. Our panelists are coming from different parts of the world as well. And welcome to the 8th virtual panel of the In Conversation with Click series, organized this time under a very important topic, which is student mental health and well-being in the era of COVID-19, a topic that has been suggested by some of our earlier participants in earlier panels. For those of you who I have not had the opportunity to meet in the past, I am Nariman Hajhamou, and I'm the founder and the CEO of the Center for Learning Innovations and Customized Knowledge Solutions, or CLICS. I'm also honored to be the chair of today's panel and to have with me eminent colleagues and experts from different parts of the world that I will introduce in just a couple of minutes. For those of you who are coming for the first time, this series of panel was launched last June with the aim of providing a platform to engage in in-depth discussions about the impact of the recent pandemic COVID-19 on the sector. It aims to really create a platform where we can share practices related to how we are navigating, these times of turbulences, and identify possible strategies and scenarios for the short and longer term planning for the sector, and be able to adjust to the new normal while building resilience as institutions as an educational ecosystem. I'm delighted to share that we are expecting participants from more than 40 countries. We welcome our participants, whether you're watching us here on Zoom or on our YouTube channel or the Voice of Higher Education. So welcome to everyone. Before we just start, I would like to remind our participants that you will be able to interact with our esteemed panelists using the Q&A function. Kindly do not use the chat function so that we can address your questions towards the end of our session. We will try our level best to take as many questions as we can from everyone. Now, without any further ado, please allow me to introduce our panelists for today. I feel quite humbled actually to be among such an elite group of professionals in the field of student service and academic student support administration. And I know that the time we have will not do them justice in terms of introducing them. But very briefly, may I first start by introducing our colleague, our panelist, Dr. Kevin Kruger. Dr. Kruger is serving as the president of NASPA, a well-known organization that is based in the USA, which I believe has more than 100 years of existence. Dr. Kruger draws on more than 40 years of experience in higher education. Prior to his role as a president, he has worked for 18 years as the associate executive director and served as the chief operating officer and the chief financial officer for NASPA. He has held a range of student affairs positions at Southern Methodist University and at the University of Maryland. Dr. Kruger has published and presented nationally as well as globally on trends in higher education, student success, degree completion strategies for low-income first-generation students, and change management and leadership in higher education. Welcome on board, Dr. Kevin. My second panelist for today is from India, is Professor Padmakali Banerjee. I hope I pronounced it properly. Pro-Vice Chancellor at Amity University in India. Professor Padmakali has over the years exhibited a passion for entrepreneurship by empowering youth and developing leaders in different walks of their lives. Her dream is really to transform the world into a happier place to live in by instilling hope and optimism in today's youth. And she's the author of the book, The Power of Positivity, Optimism and the Seventh Sense, which is a popular choice globally. Dr. Padmakali is the recipient of the prestigious 2018 Green Build Leadership Award from US GBCI for her contribution towards the environment, and she has also received the Award of Excellence from INSPA, the prestigious Indian School Psychology Association, for her contribution in promoting school psychology last November 2019. She's a member of the editorial board of the SIS Journal of Projective Psychology and Mental Health, and an active researcher. Welcome on board, Professor Padmakali. My third panelist today is another inspirational leader of student affairs, Dr. Pat Whiteley, serves as the Vice President for Student Affairs at the University of Miami, where she has acted as a Vice President for 24 years and served 39 years at the University of Miami. Dr. Whiteley has also served as a chair of NASPA and as a member of the executive board of the National Catholic Campus Ministry Association. She has received numerous awards, including the McLamore Award for Service from the University of Miami faculty, the NASPA Scott Goodnight Award, and the NASPA Fred Turner Award, which recognizes exceptional work from vice presidents for student affairs across the US. Most recently, she was honored by Miami Plaza Network as a Woman of Distinction for her service to the community, and we're delighted to have her with us today. Our next panelist representing a UAE-based university is Dr. Lisa Bardil Moscaritolo. I hope I did pronounce it correctly. Vice Provost for Student Life at the American University of Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates. Prior to moving to the UAE, Dr. Lisa served as the Associate Vice President for Student Affairs and Dean for Student at Pace University in New York for 12 years. She has also served as the Secretary General for the International Association of Student Affairs and Student Services based in Brussels. Dr. Lisa has a doctorate in leadership from Barry University in Miami. Welcome on board, Dr. Lisa. And last but not least, always representing our part of the world, our region, but this time representing Saudi Arabia, is my dear friend and colleague, Dr. Connie Mitchell, who serves as the Vice Dean of Educational Services and the Director of Teaching and Learning Center at Prince Sultan University in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. Dr. Mitchell is also a Principal Fellow of the Higher Education Academy in the UK. She joined Prince Sultan University in 2007 and has been very actively involved in a variety of committees, including chairing the Institutional Learning and Teaching Committee. She is a faculty advisor for the Student Council, and she also serves as a reviewer for various entities like TESOL, NCAA, which is the National External Quality Assurance Agency in Saudi Arabia, and SAQAF. So welcome on board, Dr. Connie. Now, in order for us to start our panel today, I think that we all realize that as COVID-19 pandemic continues to disturb and bring in significant stress to everyone's day-to-day life, it has become increasingly apparent that the mental health of the younger population aged 18 to 25 has been negatively affected. Even prior to the pandemic and prior to COVID-19, university students in many parts of the world have often experienced high rates of stress and mental health issues. And today, with the ongoing pandemic, the fear for their health and the health of their loved ones, accompanied or twinned along prolonged closure of campuses, associated physical distancing measure, which provide really for fewer opportunities to socialize, as well as the quick transition to online learning that has been challenging for many students. This has all added a very additional level of stress to students of universities and colleges. And I think that while the higher education sector has been very agile in responding and evaluating the impact of the COVID-19, to almost every facet of its operation, whether it's teaching and learning, internationalization, student enrollment, governance, and so forth, it has probably not done maybe as much as we would have hoped for in relation to addressing the impact of the pandemic on student mental health and well-being. And institutions might probably need to really rethink the way they can promote and support student mental health and well-being amid COVID-19 crisis, and really see how they can work as an ecosystem to support students of all types. The aim of our panel today is really to provide an overall assessment of the short and longer term impacts of the pandemic on students, well-being and mental health, and look at the sort of support system and measures that institutions represented by our esteemed panelists have taken at this time. So I would like to start with my first question to Dr. Kruger by asking you, Dr. Kruger, we all pretty much are aware of the direct impact that and the many challenges that COVID-19 has triggered on everyone's life. However, the extended closure of universities and colleges, campuses across many parts of the world, the imposing of all these social distancing measures is really having now a major impact on students' well-being, emotional and mental health. So what do you see some of the most predominant short and longer term impact of the pandemic on students' mental health and well-being? And being also a global organization working with student administrators from across the globe, do you see these differ from one nation to another or from one context to another? The floor is yours.
Again, thank you and welcome everyone. Thank you for having me. Let me just start with just a quick comment about what you just said. I have been on panels across the globe since the pandemic started. And I've been not surprised that the issues that we are seeing in the United States, we're seeing across the world, almost the same exact issues. So I think that's important to note that this is a global phenomenon, not simply found in one culture or country. You also said something else, which is true. This is when we talk about mental health with students, this is not a new issue. This is something we've been dealing with for quite a while. In fact, pre-pandemic, this was one of the number one topics we were certainly facing in the United States in particular. We saw higher rates of depression, anxiety, self-harm, suicide ideation over the course of the last decade. Every year you could track it going up. Pat and I have had many conversations about year-over-year increases that have been substantial. And yet, of course, what we've seen in a number of issues is when the pandemic hit, it amplified so many of the challenges we already had in our societies. And actually, I'd like to start with a poll real quickly that we did that would sort of that asks a little bit about what you think the psychological impact is of the pandemic. So if you can put that poll up, that'd be great. So we're asking here, what do you think the most common ways that COVID impacted students' lives?
And we'll probably allow a few seconds until everybody can vote, and then we'll share the results.
Okay, great. Well, yes. Okay, let's see the results. Okay, so we see stress and anxiety followed by loneliness, disappointment. Okay, so actually, you all did great. You passed the test. In fact, stress and anxiety really has been the predominant psychological issue that has been felt, followed by loneliness and isolation. Right after the pandemic, so there's two phases of this, right? The first phase was when we first had to go immediately online and when the pandemic hit. And that, I saw a word cloud, one of those word clouds that was done in the three top words that students felt after they had to go from being in class and to go home was sadness, disappointment, and frustration. Not surprising, right? Their semester, their classes are suddenly upended. But of course, this has lasted the whole semester. And what we see now is, again, what you said, stress and anxiety, loneliness, isolation. The experience of going and studying at home has been very challenging for many students. In fact, most of the surveys we've done nationally and globally, students actually, traditional age college students, do not prefer to study online. They would actually rather be in the climate of a classroom when they're interacting with their peers. And the other thing I was going to mention is that we've seen this globally is that not just do they not like being online, but this affects some students and some families more than others. So in particular, low-income families have really struggled in the pandemic, academically as well as socially. Access to broadband technology, access to a laptop or computer. I heard one story from South Africa about a family where they had to actually schedule who was going to use the computer because the family was working at home, the students were working at home, they had one computer. That kind of disruption, I think, has been a hallmark of this experience. It has come to notice that the college presidents in the United States have noticed this. We did a poll of college presidents here recently, and the #1 concern that college presidents have is student mental health. That's ahead of enrollment, financial challenges, and a variety of other things. And so you can see that this is a significant issue. So the second part of your question is what are the effects of this, and we'll dig into this as the panel goes on. But institutions have really rallied to try to address this in some ways. One is we are already doing a lot of wellness programming. We'll talk about well-being initiatives later on, but we've seen an expansion of that and actually trying to do that in an online environment. Difficult, but we've actually had some successes in that around nutrition and exercise and sleep and a variety of other things to help students deal with that. On the negative side, we're certainly going to see a generation that's going to graduate later than they would have otherwise. Many students took fewer classes or took gap years or financially simply weren't able to get to college at all during this pandemic. And we'll see that affecting this generation for a little while. And of course, the job market is going to be extremely challenging for students in the next 3 or 4 years. So this is really going to increase our need to work with students in helping develop effective career strategies in a very difficult market. So I'll stop there, and that kind of frames out, I think, some of the larger issues, and then we'll dig into some of those as we get on. So thank you.
Sure. Thank you very much. Thank you. And I'll probably ask a very similar question to Professor Padmakali. And I just wanted to see, we've heard from Dr. Kruger about some of the impact the pandemic has created in the context on students' mental health and well-being in the US context. And I was just wondering if there are any differences or any other impacts that the pandemic has caused in India, for instance.
Absolutely. I think if you look at, India is a very young population. It's the world's youngest population in terms of number of, youth in India. So you can understand the kind of impact that we are looking at. And, what I would like to really talk about is, it has impacted people in different ways. Like it all depends so much on the resilience of the person, the environment that the student is in, whether they are in nuclear homes, whether they're in extended families, whether they're living out of their own comfort zone in terms of their own town. So it has really impacted the students in very many different ways. And if you see that India, our biggest problem that had happened, because we are a very large, diverse culture, and there is a lot of, laborers or farmers who move from one part and they come to another part to work. So from down south, they go to the northeast or in the Punjab to work. So what was happening? There was a lot of people who were... As a result, it created a panic. It created a trauma. So the first thing first, that of course the government laid down very quick decisions in terms of, having a lockdown. And thanks to the disruptive technologies and online system, which was already in place, so the schools and institutions and higher learning institutions could seamlessly move to online, but that was not what was the norm. So as a result, what I saw in youth is distress, despair, uncertainty, which is they did not know where they're going, where they're heading. They had dreams. I have a lot of younger people who have taken admission in different universities, maybe whether it is Ivy League or the best universities in the world or in the India top university, and now they are stuck. A lot of people who are at the verge of getting jobs, their jobs have been deferred. So there has been a lot of, roller coaster ride, even in the Sensex index. So as a result, there has been a financial, impact that has impacted them. A lot of scholarships have been cut down. A lot of, admissions have been deferred. So as a whole, if you see, yes, it has had a great impact. And mostly because I also feel that, in spite of all of these bad news, I saw a generation of youth who took up this challenge. And I saw a lot of young entrepreneurs. They're all students of, say, engineering. They came out with great patenting ideas. They networked with a lot of tech companies. So we also saw during this time some good news pouring in. So a lot of youth could get into entrepreneurship, startups, and that really helped. They helped a lot in the social way to go and help the people who were on the crossroads, who were actually homeless people. So a lot of social entrepreneurship was also seen in India. And just to complete, I must tell you that some of the policies like, vocal for local, which meant a lot of, manufacturing, which India was dependent on, say, China and others, a lot of those things started happening. So the PPE kits and all of the masks, it started then exporting. So there, a lot of youth got involved also. So that way, if you see, it has had, multiple impact, but definitely a long time to come, they will have this in their mind, and the trauma may stay for a longer time. They have lost a lot of people in their own families. They have lost relationships. I've seen students having relationship issues. There are family within the family. There are problems that they're seeing because everybody's in the same flat, staying 24/7, months together, locked up. So all of these issues which we saw in India.
Thank you very much for these additional insights. And I'll probably ask now Dr. Pat, because I think that one of the major challenges that we face is that it's not really always easy to recognize when someone is going through a mental health crisis or an emotional challenge, especially if they are not on campus and they are remotely, studying, or if they were not particularly forthcoming with their emotions. So what do you think are the potential signs that we should be careful about or we should be watching? And what do you think is the role of different constituents other than just the counselor maybe in the counseling center?
Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you. I think that we are in a very challenging time, especially with remote learning. And so outreach has to be on the campus, the most important thing, whether it's with the counseling center, with the social workers, with your academic advisors. So we have to be making sure that they know that our staff, our counseling staff, our social workers are present, and that the faculty, I've done a number of letters to the faculty, making sure that they know the signs, and obviously signs of not showing up. This challenge of people that don't ever turn their cameras on. So you never know the kind of interaction you really are going to have with the student. But I think the pattern of not showing up, not completing the work, some of the same things that would be in the classroom potentially, but it's just so much more challenging, especially when you're a faculty member and you have a screen of 30 students and trying to figure it out. It's also looking for students that are not doing as well. The academic alerts become much more important. All I can say, and I think everybody would feel the same way, are case managers. And really, the United States started putting case managers in our Deans of Students office around 2000, 2001. I think, Kevin, that's about exactly when that happened. And those case managers, our cases are up at the University of Miami, for example, 1,000%. I mean, how do you counter for 1,000%? But it comes back to all the folks, faculty, staff, students, social workers, the RAs, people that are working in the buildings and that are in the residence, how all of them are connecting the dots. And I also think there's a real importance now of peer leaders. So we even have remote assistants. So students that are just interacting with our remote students to see how they're doing. And the importance of referrals and to the counseling centers, to the case managers. And obviously, we were then following up on all the students that were in quarantine or isolation. At UM, we had over 1,000 students in that category from August to November. And we actually started doing Zoom calls with the students in quarantine and isolation every night at 8 o'clock with a case manager as a check-in. I think it's another thing that's been really important is our group. All the things we do with our groups have been exponentially increased because students want that interaction. We're actually going to even have a group in the spring for all of our student leaders and our RAs because they're under tremendous stress. So I think it's, our leaders have to be out there talking about mental health as much as possible, promoting all of our resources. We just can't do the same kinds of things that you usually could do on a campus. And so all the things you can do with Instagram technology, FaceTime, I've done a number of Instagram lives. I've done things that I've never thought that I would do, but that's really, really important to use the technology. So those are some things.
Dr. Pat, just a very quick follow-up question. Do you see a stronger partnership between academics, I mean instructors and faculty members, and actually people working in counseling now because of COVID?
Absolutely. I mean, listen, we were already having a pretty strong partnership because really the students and the faculty need us, okay, in terms of working with our students. But I think that we have increased that over the last 10 months. And I've worked very closely with our faculty senate, for example, with our faculty senate leaders. I've gone to all the college meetings of the faculty. So there's some things in outreach that I didn't do before, but given COVID, I mean, the thing that Kevin said this morning and all of us, COVID has impacted everyone. Nobody has been missed by this pandemic. And so, yes, I do believe that there's a stronger partnership and an appreciation of what student affairs and mental health leaders have had to manage to keep the universities going during this time, because that's another factor that's, we don't want to talk about too much, but to keep things going is very, very important, both for our students, but for our staff and faculty, and for our communities where our universities are located.
Thank you very much. And I'm sure we'll follow up on some of the things you've been doing in the next round of questions. My question is to Dr. Connie Mitchell. And I just wanted to ask you, what do you see, who do you see in particularly vulnerable during these difficult times? And, what can we really do to support those students? And how can we be proactive, to this particular category of students? As an example, we didn't, maybe last spring, we didn't have so many problems with new freshman students, but now we see students who are coming for the first time to university and they're studying completely online. So who do you see as the most vulnerable students during these difficult times?
Okay, thank you. Like Dr. Pat and Dr. Kevin said, I think the biggest thing that we have to take into consideration is that this pandemic has not been easy for anybody. And in education, and in particular higher education, we were provided the opportunity to change our teaching and learning environment from face-to-face to online, even in K through 12 schools, so that we could continue to support our students' opportunities for learning. But taking that into consideration, when we think about who our students are and who needs this support, it has kind of caused a paradigm shift, if you will, of sorts, to education as a whole, in reference to our students. And then as an example, I can refer to my own institution, Prince Sultan University. I believe as a whole, our students are doing well, but we have been focusing on helping students overcome their perceptions of learning. Yeah. They have to change their perceptions of learning so that they can perform better in their courses. They're used to that face-to-face interaction, and now it's online. And as you keep mentioning, the camera on, the camera off, how do you engage? We request that our students keep their cameras on so that there can be that face-to-face engagement and they won't feel so isolated. This is one of the things that we have been doing. However, the main concern would be students with learning difficulties and those who might have limited resources for online education, as I believe it was Dr. Pat or Dr. Kevin who pointed out that there is a family and there's only one computer for everybody. So they had to negotiate the timing of who's going to be using what for that particular situation. So in higher education, we need to be aware of those situations and allow and afford flexibility for those students who might not have the technology now that we have switched online. Now, if we come back to those students with learning difficulties, in this region, it's difficult to have students come forward with learning difficulties because learning difficulties or mental health issues, if you will, it's considered taboo to talk about it, to come forward and say, I have ADD or I'm dyslexic. So we have to come up with creative ways to figure out who these students are so that we can support them. So We have ways of encouraging these students to get support, like training the academic advisors, the faculty members to support struggling students, or to spot these issues so that we can refer them to the counselor and the Deanship of Student Affairs. I think this is extremely important. Also, communication is the key to reaching out to the students. Being transparent and accessible. Luckily, at my own institution, we had the support of the higher administration so that we were able to implement what was needed to continuously improve and strengthen the communication. I think transparency and accessibility during this pandemic. Despite all the resources available, students still don't necessarily verbalize their mental health struggles. And many do not know exactly how to help peers who appear to be lonely, sad, or even distant. So how do we start the conversation? Well, I think the following actions can be used, and what we have tried to do is a chat bot has been created to provide answers for certain questions. Counselors are available on both campuses online. Webinars have been given, extracurricular activities have moved to the online platform.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Dr. Connie, if you allow, we can address that in the next point, because my next question to you is actually going to be, what is PSU doing, to address the issue of mental health? But I'd like to actually pick up on a point that you've just highlighted very rightly, the issue of communication. And Professor Padmakali also mentioned something about students not knowing where to go. And my question would be to Dr. Lisa. I think that an important aspect during the pandemic is really having ongoing, open, honest, and clear communication with different stakeholders, but very specifically with students. And why we want to really be honest, we also have to be conscious not to create panic. And my question is really, what do you think should be done in regards to communication and ensuring that, we're proactive and we're basically, telling students what to do and where to go and, what is available for them?
Yeah, thank you for that. I do think, like Dr. Connie said, and you said for sure, that it can cause anxiety for students if we don't give them the right information. So I would say I could share a little bit of what AUS did related to communications, which I'm sure might be similar to other universities. But from the beginning, it was really important that we created a central website, a central hub where students could go to get the information and the updates. And that started, I think, maybe December or January. I'm trying to think back. Seems so long ago, right? I remember the first message be coming from University Healthcare. So that was a targeted message about what was going on and reminding people on best practices for flus and colds and so forth. But when coronavirus was elevated to a point, communication started to be centralized and made sure that it was first coming from the top. Centralized, whether it was from the chancellor's office, provost, or campus communication, there was a centralized message. And I think that was very important. And there were times that was hard because we were still waiting for answers from the Ministry of Education or the Ministry of Health and Prevention in the United Arab Emirates. It wasn't clear, and we had to wait for that information sometimes. So it was a balance on what information we send out and waiting. So I think that was hard because you want to be transparent. You want the information to be correct. So we struggled, but I think we had some successes on getting the communication out. And once we had that communication out, for example, when we were closing the campuses, then we could do targeted messages with more details to certain student populations, because it's overwhelming when they get a message like that the campus is closed. So targeted communications also helps with what we talked about, and I think Connie talked about accessibility. Who do they go to? And that's why the targeted communications, I think, was so important. So for example, here's some examples. So housing, here in the UAE, which a lot of you guys happened to during spring break, students were gone. Their belongings were still in the room when we closed campuses. That hurts, right? That's their belongings. They're concerned about that. So targeted communications to ensure the students it actually came from my office, so they knew to talk with me and with also student housing concerns. So that was one. The counseling center, targeted communications. we continue to try to, as we move forward, and anytime there was a large communications about what was going to happen from the top down, is then filter it to the different areas where the students need to know something, need to know what services are open, counseling center, how to find a counselor. That was important. And then, for example, as we moved on in the semester, is how to do advising. We were trying to be on top of the game, and then we'd always circle back to the FAQ page that was part of the central website. So those are some of the things we tried to do. I think on a personal communication, one of the things too is, again, we did use a lot of email because that was the best way to get things out. We used HubSpot too, which we can manage and see how many people answered emails, got the information. But I think we also, when I say targeted communications as well, is that we made sure they were friendly, like my communications, and I know we could say this and so forth, but friendly and transparent. We all, as everyone has said, Pat, Dr. Pat, this has been a trying time for everyone. And so it's been very difficult. And so we want to make sure that we care for them. And here in the United Arab Emirates, it's not uncommon for us to ask how their family's doing. So that was very common as part of the caring communication that we would do. There were times when we picked up the phone to call a student, or did Google Meets, or to check in how students were doing. We had WhatsApp groups. So I would say in summary, at this part, because I have a poll question, is that the centralized communication, making sure it was accurate, waiting for the information we needed if we could. There were some times we were still waiting, like even for example, of how we're going to start spring semester. We announced that, but we also have, if you go to our FAQ page, it says more information to come once we hear from the ministry. So those are some things that I think our students are used to now. So they understand what's happening.
Right.
Targeted communications, ensuring information is correct. And so I think that's a key, but I would love to ask my poll question too.
Yes, sure. Can we have the poll now? It's actually one of the things that students found very frustrating at the beginning, that we didn't have answers, and they wanted to know when they would graduate. And so,
yeah, I mean, that, of course, we had many targeted communications on that, and we had a committee, we all did what we can on that. My question here is really talking about the vulnerable, and that we talk about, and what Pat talked about is making sure that internally people know where to go, faculty, staff, and students. So this is the poll to see if they know where to go to help a student. Okay, I think we're ready. Wonderful. Well, I appreciate the yes answers. So I do think this is really important, and Pat talked about this too. And I've gone to many faculty meetings. Our deans have talked to the faculty from the different schools and colleges, making sure that faculty and staff and other students, I've talked to student leaders, that if they see a peer or they're concerned about someone, they know where to go. We have a Students of Concern Committee, or SOCC, and basically that information is shared, and there's different people on the committee from the schools, the colleges, advising offices, counseling, disability services. I could go on, but really we want to make sure that everyone knows where to go to if there's a student of concern, a vulnerable student, like Dr. Connie said. And once we have that information, some examples of how we can assist a student is making sure they're safe, making sure they get to a counselor, assisting a student. Another thing could be is maybe there's a student and a parent that maybe a medical leave of absence is best, and assisting them through that process, which a lot of times that's what I do, and trying to help, or another one of my staff members. It could be just being there, and also someone reaching out from the committee of a student that just is struggling and needs to think about more coping skills. Maybe doesn't need the counseling center, but needs to vent and think about another resource that can help them at the university. So really connecting the students. So having a plan of communication where internally Everyone knows where to go. I know our faculty feel grateful to have that. They have told me that. And so they could tell someone what's going on, like Dr. Pat also mentioned.
So thank you, Lisa. And I mean, many of you have already touched upon many things that you've already doing in your institution. But for many institutions, we had a very thin, maybe support system in terms of counseling. You know, the ratio counselor to student is usually humongous if a counselor was actually available on campus. And what I actually wanted to really know is that if you can share the sort of additional support or services that you have provided as institutions to help students during the time of COVID-19. You know, what extra support have you been in? How do you see, for instance, the role of parents as well? I mean, especially in our part of the world where parents are still pretty much involved with their kids when they're in university and all. So maybe we can start with Lisa, continue with Lisa very quickly, and then we can also hear from other colleagues.
Okay, I'll just go by quickly. I mean, obviously, as I mentioned, counseling services is utmost importance. And so we made sure they knew how to get a hold of, and that we were going to be accessible and flexible on how we meet with students based on what their needs are. We also did a lot of education through the counseling center, and not just the counseling center. I want to say here in athletics, which is a little bit different, but our coaches also became wellness instructors. They did sessions on sleep, in different topics like that, and our counselors, and we, as I think it was I don't remember who mentioned it, but we've had tremendous success as students want to engage and they want to talk about these topics. And then I will just say too, that is using student leaders and making sure that they help out and they step up and want to be part of the solution. Two things I'll just mention that was really neat that our students did. They did a well-being packet for students around midterms, and it had fun ideas like puzzles to complete, coloring books, different fun things to happen. And that was a really neat. And then the other thing I would say that is important is that faculty, one of the things our faculty did that I heard from our students, it was very appreciative, is they did a lot of icebreakers to get the students together and peers, and social well-being is so important to the students. So they said they really appreciated the time to have icebreakers, or maybe it's around a topic that they're listening, but really break down the class so they can meet each other and talk. So that's just some strategies on well-being.
I mean, community building in an online environment is one of the big challenges, and faculty role becomes very important there. And I've seen a couple of questions from our audience on actually faculty well-being and how can they support. So we'll probably have time at the end of the session to address some of those questions. But I'd like to ask Pat also about the Miami University and what are you really doing in terms of supporting students' mental health and well-being?
A couple of things. One of the things that I never would have ever anticipated, but we have a very, very large parent Facebook group. And before the pandemic, I would never have ventured into that space because I would have just been like, no. Well, it turns out that my own daughter is actually a first-year student at the University of Miami. So they couldn't kick me out. So I ventured into the space. And let me just say this, I've been overwhelmed and impressed because I've actually had a great relationship with the moderator of the Cool Parent Facebook group, who's a lawyer in another part of the United States. And this parent of a junior at the University of Miami and I have problem solved all semester long. I mean, I think there was one day where we talked 10 times. Because the parents were reaching out to her about their son or daughter, and she was getting them the appropriate triage help. And I know that might sound bizarre and a little bit off, what we would usually do, okay? But this is not usual times. And I think that's what we have to decide. And so, Stacy, the Cool Parent Facebook group at the University of Miami, she's been one of my, heroes, okay? And so, that is just an example of using something outside the box, if you will. And the other things are for the spring, and I think a lot of universities are doing this. We're going to have something called Wellness Wednesdays, like 3 or 4 times, where we're going to do a whole day on well-being. Many of us are not doing our typical spring breaks for obvious reasons with travel. So we're trying to incorporate that into our campus programming. And I'm proud to say that our wellness center, we have a wellness and recreation center, we have been able to keep it open by having only a session in the morning, then a cleaning session from 12 to 2 over lunch, and then another session. So that having that resource, as well as the fact that our weather allows us to have a lot of outdoor recreation classes. Lisa is a big spinner, I remember. And Lisa, we have the outdoor spinning there for out there. So that's been really helpful. So I think, it's continuing outreach, creative flexibility. You can't be afraid to take a risk in this kind of time, because you don't know what you're going to find. And I'm just really even with the Cool Parent Facebook group, I'm glad I was joining, because it was something that for 6 years I said I will never get on that in my entire life. And because, you do hear the chatter of the things that are just not accurate. So that's just a couple of examples from the university.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Connie, Dr. Mitchell, you've mentioned a bit of things that you've been doing at PSU, but if you can just tell us of specific things related to COVID-19 and how you're addressing the mental health of students.
Okay, thank you. I just want to touch upon what Dr. Pat was just saying about the wellness. And we have established a Jubilation Center, and they've created this WOW Hour, which is the Wheel of Wellness. And they work with our we have a health and physical education department, and they do deal with health and well-being. So they're trying to reach out to both faculty and staff, and hopefully that can expand upon to students as well. So in answer to your question, we recognize that an approach to supporting students, you need to be flexible. Allow for diversity and thinking outside the box, as Dr. Pat has just said, so that everyone can keep motivated and feel supported in many different ways. Some of the initiatives running across the university, from senior management to various centers like the Teaching and Learning Center, is we've posted videos to students and staff outlining decisions about what is happening. So this goes back to the communication and encouraging them as well, the faculty, the students, to use creative thoughts and ideas that can help further support. As I was mentioning previously, about the chatbot and the counselors, the webinar, extracurricular activities. We also have a psychology club. They've provided support via various activities and like a greet and meet, and how to basically survive the pandemic. Just a way for students to come and discuss and get rid of some of that stress and anxiety that they might be experiencing. Of course, a hotline is available for the students and from our Deanship of Student Affairs. The Academic Advising Center has emphasized online meeting sessions with the students and has provided multiple training sessions for the faculty to be able to communicate with the students so that we can do that. The Teaching and Learning Center has worked with the faculty to get them engaged with addressing issues and being able to discuss it in the classroom, because sometimes students bring it up and you need to know how to help them deal with what's going on in their home environment. Icebreakers, show and tell, whatever the case may be, to help them stay positive. Surveys have been administered to get feedback from the students. And I think lastly, I want to say that the student council and our student council has been very active during this time, and bringing the alumni through webinar to communicate with the current student body. They even themselves got representatives from each of the colleges. They went and they communicated with the new students who joined in the fall of this semester, so that, because they're not on campus. So it was just a way to make them feel like they're part of the PSU environment. So I really commend our student council for being so active, and they do get to express their concerns to the higher management as well. So they hear from the students, and then they're able to share that with the higher management.
And hopefully we can touch upon later on about this issue of student council and the role they can play to support their peers as well. Maybe we can hear also from the Professor Padmakali about, in Amity, what are the sort of support that you've been providing?
Right. So what we have is a single window student services. So within, I think, weeks that had to go online, because although that was partially online earlier and partially in person where the students could come and interact, I think that was the very first thing that was done. Very interesting, I want to put across that what we did was we started many creative courses. For example, a lot of students were interested in, there were already some centers of excellence like robotics, and a lot of our students were interested in drones. So these kind of activities brought students into a particular pursuit, and a lot of people could choose from a basket of such courses. We also offer a program on, foreign languages, because a lot of our students who are traveling to, say, Germany, or they want to learn a particular language. So in fact, we opened that to many people, and they could, learn whatever languages extra they wanted to learn over a period of time. Third, very interestingly, our student clubs and, councils which are there active, they started a lot of online, suddenly online chess, online, sports became very, very popular. And finally, also, like, already I think Pat had touched upon it, I was really thanking the social media in terms of the inhibition that, faculty had for using the social media, or the fear of, getting lost in the social media. But this came as a boon. So a lot of support groups which were already active, and a lot of support groups were created for the students at the university. We have a course on clinical psychology, so which offers a program on MPhil and Masters in clinical psychology. So we have about a dozen and more very trained psychotherapists and psychologists. So what we did was we opened the Guidance and Counseling Center on one-on-one counseling, even on the hours which were in the evening. And a lot of our doctoral students who were comparatively, they had more time to dedicate, we brought them in as counselors, and we really could, help the students. And we also believed that it was not just the students. Sometimes we had to get on and interact with the families, because, especially for undergraduate students, there, at least in India, there is a lot of support that is given from the, environment in terms of the families. So at some point, we had to also reach out to the families if there was a crisis. So I think it was a kind of a mixed bag, but we were evolving because nobody expected this pandemic. Because, during just before the pandemic, India celebrated is one of the biggest festival, which is Holi, where I think people mix around a lot. So that was around, I think, between 8th or 12th of March. And lo and behold, on 20th of March, everything was shut down. I think this is the kind of things that we saw happening. But I think what we also could do was a lot of industry simulated programs, a lot of corporate sectors, because we are at Gurugram, which is a corporate hub. So we had a lot of, big multinational companies, because they were also at a, major problems that was happening. But we could hold a lot of good, mentorship program, immersion programs. But of course, most of them were online. And finally, we also did a lot of screening, like mental health screening tools were used. That one of the tools that, which I developed a couple of years back, which is also published in my book on Optimism Index. I remember 2 years back, people were thinking, what is so much important about, resilience and positivity? And suddenly, we could do a lot of screening, and based on the, result, we could actually help them. Similarly, we paid a lot of interest to even nutrition. So we worked with our other teams within the college. We also have an allied health program. So we worked along with the students and the faculty to work on the overall, because there was a binge eating, binge watching, and sitting on the computers all day. So we tried to bring that in as well. And we gave a lot of liberty to the young faculty to come out with new ways So they didn't have to go through the bureaucracy of coming to the Pro VC for everything. So we could give some kind of, leeway where they could come out with good practices. And we said every classroom at least spend about 10 minutes interacting with the students beyond the curriculum. So, all of that put together, it was an interesting but a difficult journey. And we really feel that hope this pandemic gets over fast. But this learning will stay. I think some of the good practices can stay, because at least for me, online examination was something that the inhibition that was there, it just suddenly everybody accepted it. So that is something which is also there.
I think that the pandemic has brought challenges, but has brought also a lot of opportunities. I'd like to actually ask Dr. Kurger, because he doesn't represent a university, but he has the opportunity to work with many academic student support administrators and so forth. And I wanted to really ask specifically about counseling. What role do you see counseling play in these difficult times? And what sort of innovations have we seen in counseling? We've seen lots of innovation, and Dr. Padmakali was referring to some of them. So what have we seen in the field of counseling, across institutions you've been working with?
Yeah, thanks. One of the things that before the pandemic, you kind of mentioned this, several others have, we were already so over capacity in our counseling centers. We just couldn't have enough counselors to deal with this generation's mental health struggles. Now, we in the United States, where our counsel ratio is very favorable, right? So we have staffed a lot of counselors in our counseling center, but even there, it's not been enough. And so we were already moving in a different direction to supplement that. And the basic principle always has been, we need to get upstream of the problem, meaning we need to get in ahead of some of these psychological issues. You mentioned, some of the panelists have mentioned resiliency. How do you help teach resiliency, optimism? We know that, for example, there's some research being done out of Wake Forest and the Wellbeing Collaborative that optimism, meaning, and belonging all contribute positively to a sense of well-being. So how do you, so doing that has been an important priority. However, having said that, there's still a need for interventions from professionals. What we've seen in the United States and also globally is an acceptance of telecounseling as an acceptable modality. So 5 years ago, when we surveyed all the counseling center directors in the United States, only 5% out of the entire country were using any kind of telecounseling or online counseling. Now, of course, in the midst of the pandemic, we've had to immediately shift to using telecounseling. Now, there's a cottage industry of companies that are helping campuses do that, and that has sort of exploded. But I think we'll see in the future the advantages of online counseling as one strategy that we have available to us. A couple of things to note about that. So many students who work full-time, there's cultural sensitivity about going to a counseling center. There may be some conditions like PTSD and agoraphobia that prevent students from going to a counseling center. So having this as part of the array of services, I think, will be really positive going forward. It doesn't reduce the need to have online in-person counselors, but it expands our ability to reach more students. Culturally, as you know, some cultures just simply feel uncomfortable going to a counseling center and will be more likely to do something online. The other thing I would mention is that we have seen, we do a training program for peer educators to work effectively on campuses. And we have normally do that in person. We'll go to a campus and train those peers, but now we've been doing that online. That program has just exploded, meaning that campuses are really wanting to see new ways to connect peers. And Pat, you mentioned a couple of examples already, really important tool in our toolbox about ways which we can to address that. Last thing, one of the folks in the question Q&A had asked about Daniel Goleman's work on emotional intelligence, and could that be a role or a tool? And of course, the issues around self-awareness and empathy and social skills are really important as students are struggling in this time period. So I think that's just one kind of construct we could use in the ways in which we're training and working with students and helping expand their emotional intelligence. Absolutely good strategy. You know, in the long run, just like now, all of us, if we go see a doctor, we may go to the doctor's office, but increasingly we'll actually communicate with our doctor in an online environment. I think we're going to see more of that as well as it expands the telecounseling, and that will be something that will stay with us and will be a very positive thing. We'll reach more students this way, and it'll be a positive movement for us.
Thank
Kevin,
you
if
very
I
much.
could just jump in and say something about the telecom. We're actually seeing less absenteeism and people canceling with telecounseling than we did with in-person. So you would think almost the opposite, but it's not the case. Our percentage is really very, very few canceled telecounseling. So I think that's another insight that we're going to have to think about offering different modalities going forward. Sorry to interrupt, but I just had to say.
No, that's good. That's a good point, Pat.
No worries at all. Thank you very much. And just before we open the floor to the audience questions, if you can very quickly tell us about the strategies that you feel that universities and colleges should really consider carefully in order to promote student mental health and well-being and be more proactive. You know, where are the maybe 1-2 strategies that you would recommend very quickly? We'll start probably with Dr. Pat, since you know she was sharing her insights, and then we can go to other colleagues.
I think we just have to continue to use the technology that we have before us, and use that in a creative way and understand the new technology that comes on. TikTok videos, Snapchat, all of it we can use to reach students. And so we have to kind of go out of our own generation comfort zone, if you will. And I think I'll go back to Kevin, that the peer leaders become really, really important, and cultivating those key leaders. What I worry about is we're essentially going to lose, and in some respects, a class, because we have had so much less interaction with this first year students that we're not going to see their growth as peer leaders as much as we would have others in terms of things. So we're going to have to put resources into the second year class next year in order to have results for our juniors and seniors. So, third and fourth year. But I think just continuing to really look at the ways that we can use our technology to further student well-being are things that I think about.
Okay, thank you very much. And Professor Padmakali, from your end,
Yes, absolutely. I think there is definitely the technology is one of the things that we will be using. But for me, what I feel is, creating that sense of eudaimonic well-being within a university would be very important, because wherein, if you look at, years back when Aristotle talked about purpose in life and, the meaningfulness. So the more we engage student in the right direction, I think that can come through a lot of, good activities and ways, and accepting as they are, because, there will be diverse people. For example, during the pandemic, if you ask a student, are you sad? It is okay to feel sad. It is okay to be under stress. But till the time that doesn't get into distress and it doesn't come in on the way. So I think the sense where the message that goes to the students of a university that we care for them. So there has to be a place where they can come out and start their own clubs and activities, giving a lot of, independence in terms of starting up new ideas. I think startup is a great way to allow their ideas to boom. And because if you see, mental health is not a separate entity, it's part of our, living. We are all growing in a way that, the world is changing, and it is a chaotic world. I think they are all learners in crisis. All these students who are coming to us are learners in crisis. So they have to be dealt with that compassion, and creating a lot of avenues within the university, I think would be a great idea.
And the culture has to be there.
Culture, acceptance,
right.
Diverse. Yeah.
So Dr. Mitchell, if we can hear from you very quickly.
Yes, I think in general, when we talk about our students' well-being or their state of being comfortable, healthy, or happy, we need to be able to connect with them to devise ways of support that are suited to their needs. So, for example, promote extracurricular activities that can be done online or via virtual means in order to help students. I've seen people doing virtual tours of museums and different entities that have gone out of their way to bring educators to them. And I think this is important that we are able to do this. Universities need to remain flexible. The lines of communication need to be open and transparent, and find ways or means that work best for your institution. I mean, I know we're all sharing the ideas that we have, and we can find some similarities in things that we can do, but at the end of the day, it comes back to our own institution, our own student body, our own faculty members, and what's going to work best for us. I do believe that professional development is a great way to raise awareness of student mental health and well-being for not only the students, but for the faculty and admin staff too. And 2 more points I want to make. One, I think it's important to encourage the faculty members themselves to take 5 minutes every now and then inside the classroom and provide an avenue for the students to talk about their lives during the pandemic. It gives them an outlet. And then it helps them bond with their peers inside the classroom. And also, I think it's important that the PD for students and the Teaching and Learning Center at our institution, we had 2, I think, really important sessions by one of our psychology teachers, and it was Uninstall COVID-19, Reboot Mental Health. And then the second one was mental health and productivity during COVID-19. So it was just a way for the students to learn about what's going on and help them. So I really think PD is extremely important for everybody involved.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Lisa?
Oh, my colleagues said a lot, and I would agree. I mean, I think one of the things that Dr. Kani said that I think about the faculty, there's such an important piece, and I just wrote on the question and answer, and the Professional Development Center has been doing some great things with the faculty, and they care too, they're under stress too, and I think for the first time, it's exacerbated, and we're talking a lot about it in our societies, and I think that they want to learn how more to help students. So I do agree the social well-being in the classroom, if we can improve that, that's important. The other thing I would just add is that culturally we have at AUS, we have nationality is very important, and we have 36 different culturally based clubs based on nationality. And why I say that is that the importance of that is to touch base with those communities in the way they want to. So what I'm trying to say is we also have a student activity coordinator that works with each student leader group, the leaders of the Palestine Club, the whatever it is, Palestinian Club, or the Saudi Arabia Club. And so they can touch base with the students they're doing. So I think that important piece to break down the cultural sources, I think helps too. So that's all I add at this point, but thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. And Kevin, maybe, from a system perspective, what sort of, strategies do you see the institution at the highest level taking?
Yeah, so this has come up a couple of times. I want to reinforce it, and that is, this is literally, as they say, it takes a village to address this. And so this is not simply the counseling center nor student services. It really does take the whole entire community, and that means a commitment from faculty, staff, students. It's critical that faculty play a role here. I know we have a lot of faculty on the call here, and sometimes faculty can be a little nervous about even asking a student how they're doing, because they're afraid the student's going to say, "I'm thinking about killing themselves." Well, we need to get past that fear, because really, it is so critical for faculty to engage, and many of you mentioned this, in conversations with students about just how they're doing, what their life is like. That connection is super, super important. And so sometimes that means more faculty training, and we got to get as faculty to understand that they play a really critical role. They see these students almost every day, and so that kind of engagement is super important. Let's give faculty the role. Pat, you mentioned you've been talking to your faculty colleagues more than ever. I think that's really critical in engaging in that. As Dr. Connie said, or I think it was Dr. Padmakali, it's okay if a student's sad. Hey, we're all sad. We're all struggling with mental health right now. We're all isolated. We all don't want to stare at the screen for 8 hours a day. So to normalize some of the experiences the students are having and not have them be pathological. So sadness, loneliness, feeling a little disconnected. This is a normal experience in the middle of this pandemic. And again, helping faculty understand that as well. So I would say that's a really important conversation. Every faculty meeting should be talking about this issue. Every faculty senate meeting, a department chair should be talking about this. And the student services folks, since we deal with this more frequently, we can actually be a good resource in those conversations. And hopefully we're seeing an increase in those kind of conversations.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to take a few questions from our audience. I know that some of them you might have touched upon already, but we have a question here that says that is really whether sitting in an online environment for a long duration may actually affect the cognitive abilities of students and how to help them. And I've seen later on another colleague is talking about, what we could do in terms of designing course content and engaging learning experience. So maybe one of you might actually want to touch upon that.
Just to say, first thing, before the pandemic, we knew that online learning, there was a lot of studies that the learning, actual outcomes were as effective as in person. Okay, so that yes. Online is not a problem in terms of a modality. What is important though is it requires a different kind of pedagogy and a different kind of teaching in itself. And so you just can't take your regular class and throw it on PowerPoint and start teaching. So I think we, all of higher education, is just going to need to get better at online education. It's not going away in order to get the right kind of outcomes, and understand that a hybrid environment actually is going to be the best environment for learning in the long term. I'll stop there.
In fact, I was coming to that. I think what we are going to see now is a hybrid and a more blended learning. And some of the good parts of the online is yet going to stay. Not only learning, if you look at the future of work, the remote working is going to be now a norm. A lot of Salesforce are going to work remotely. So it's a good practice for students to understand that aspect. I think, yes, but to answer the cognitive aspect, yes, if you're there for very long hours, you need a break. So you do not possibly need a 60-minute class session. You can break it into smaller classes where, you can do a lot of things on their own, self-study, so the long hours in a classroom, attention span, it does matter.
Right. And I think that also addresses the question from Dr. Ahmed, who was actually talking about, the actual delivery level and the course content. And I think that one of the things that, we need to really move away from what we call emergency remote teaching to meaningful online learning experiences, which is not really replicating our face-to-face class in an online environment, but really re-engineering the way we do things, rethinking about the way we engage students, the way we design our content, the way we assess students, because what works in the face-to-face context might not necessarily work in an online environment. And as Kevin mentioned, there are many meta-studies that have compared actually in terms of learning outcomes, face-to-face versus online. And we know that we can deliver the same quality, but it needs actually to really think outside of the box and not try to replicate what we do. And that's where professional development, as Dr. Mitchell mentioned, is important, not just for the counseling, but also a lot for the faculty member, to get them really to feel themselves comfortable teaching in that environment. So we have actually another question from one of our colleagues, and he's actually asking in cases of universities with international students, and that's maybe something we haven't touched upon a lot in the panel, who follow online classes, there are a very high degree of anxiety among them. What would be the golden rule to reassure them on confidence of inclusivity, particularly in the blended mode instruction? So I think international students are really ones that might have been affected the most. So if any one of the colleagues would like to address the question.
I think what we did was we brought in a lot of alumni from the same culture and who could connect with them, because, it is true that they may have different kinds of problems. They may have, they may be the first generation who are coming into an international university to study. So they have their own issues. So I think culturally bringing that in, and that can be brought in even in your visual communication so that they feel more included. And the culture within the organization, like they have to be wanted at the same in the university, just like the people from the same country. So we do have a lot of students coming from Africa and Nigeria. So at this time, suddenly they are cut out and they do not know the well-being of their families. So there is a sense that can be brought in, and even taking up, case studies, culturally from the context from where the students are coming. When they're taking up a project can be given in their country to solve their issues. So those kinds of teaching methods can be really used.
Right. Anyone else who would like to follow up on this particular question? Because I think the issue of international students is an important one.
I would just say that our international student offices are going to be so important, and continuing outreach to them, to our students that are abroad, especially as it relates to time differences. I know that there's been a lot of anxiety with our students taking courses, for example, in Dubai, and thinking about what time that is. And we've actually moved some of our course times back so that to further accommodate our students in the Middle East, in China, so that it's not as taxing for them to continue to participate in classes. So we're trying to kind of meet folks a little bit halfway. But I think the most you can do for outreach and making sure that they know that you are still, even though you are abroad, a part of our community. And we are excited to welcome you back when it's safe to do so, or when you're comfortable to do so. I think that those things are really important.
Yeah, and I agree with Pat. And I would just add too, again, because we have so many cultural based organizations and these are students, international students, I think it's important that they connect with that organization and they connect and get connected with that. And because we're primarily remote right now, but also, so they could do that remotely. Also, I would say if we could, we do have some students that are on campus, and if we can get them on campus, even students that are overseas, because of the time difference, we will try to get them in the residence halls. We've tried to do that. It's just been difficult because of flights and, and visas and stuff like that. That's the only thing I'll add. It's been hard, but if we can, we will help.
Okay, so one other issue that, I've heard lots of colleagues talking about, and there's a question also from one of our participants here, is basically about students getting very easily distracted in online environments. And obviously part of it is the role of the professor and, the way they create an engaging virtual classroom and so forth. But, from a support, from a systems perspective and a support perspective, what are the kind of things that we could actually do to make students more focused in their studies?
If I may jump in here.
Yes, please.
That's a very good question, because I have my students who actually sometimes say it's difficult for them to focus, especially if there's a lot of students in the online classroom and they can't have that individualized attention from the instructor. I would imagine that's the same face-to-face or online. But for me, I think that we need to educate them about online learning. It's a paradigm shift, as I was saying before, for faculty, but also for students. They expect, their expectations. They want that engagement that they have in the face-to-face classroom. And they get frustrated when they can't have that type of engagement. So we as educators have to really think outside the box, come up with different activities to engage our students. I think one of the participants was talking about, different games that you can be using to get them to participate more. I do group activities. I have one-on-one sessions with my students. Trying to get them to realize that, we're here to help them learn and support them. This is extremely important because right now they're not coming to campus. So they need to feel that our presence, whether it's the teacher or it's the advisor, it's the counselor, it's the administration, it's the higher management, whatever their particular need is, they need to feel our presence.
Right. And I think we'll take, just because of the sake of time, one final question with very quick responses to it. And basically it's because we've touched upon the importance of students' clubs and student councils. And one of our colleagues are asking, in fact, about the sort of incentives that we actually would consider to make students really get involved and engaged. So what sort of incentives for the colleagues who mentioned, you know, their student councils and clubs have you maybe provided your students to keep them active, specifically during these difficult times? I mean,
I just added one thing to the question, just is looking at what skills they can build, because our student leaders know what skills they need in the future when they graduate. So we've been able to participate in wonderful virtual opportunities that are free, leadership conferences and so forth. So those type of things have really been successful for our student leaders to keep them excited and keep them energized.
What we have done is a lot of young students who have really created something new. During these times, they've been writing in not only the college magazines, but also in the newspapers. And they are getting some, of course, some basic, awards and recognition in terms of doing a program around whatever they have achieved during these times. So there is a wall wall of expression where they can come and write and talk to the dean welfare or their faculty, and they are getting recognized. And some of them are picked as college ambassadors, so that they are able to represent the college at large conferences, which is happening now worldwide on an online platform. So I think students are generally very happy whenever they need something meaningful to do. So, and they are all very happy about being recognized.
Right, thank you.
Online,
so yes,
online competitions. We've held several online competitions, and with that, awards were given to the students, and then it gets publicized that they have won these awards. So I think it's really good to get them involved.
I mean, time has been flying so quickly, but in just 30 seconds, I mean, we've talked a lot about things that institutions and counselors and faculty could be doing. But if you had one final piece of advice to give to students, and not the institutions, not the professors, not the faculty, during these difficult times, to really help them navigate through them, what that would be, very quickly, if we can start with Professor Padmakali, and then we'll go to other colleagues.
So my message to the youth is, you are going to be having a great life ahead. So this is the right time, and it's a moment of crisis. So self-management, do it happily, build on your seventh sense or your optimistic intelligence, and win the war and come out successful. All the best to you.
Thank you, Dr. Kevin.
I would say, make sure that you are connecting to the people around you. We know that friends, parents, family members are really critical in this time period as students are away from the campus. So make those connections and reach out, social media, phone, stay connected.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Mitchell?
I think I agree with what Dr. Kevin was just saying, is that for the students, find the ways or means that work best for you. In terms of staying connected, supporting, for your learning, for your well-being, and most importantly, we will get through this together.
Right. And Dr. Lisa?
Yeah, mine was, you're not alone. Like what Connie said, is just, I hope everyone in the ASU community knows they're not alone, and others, that there's always someone else, and stay connected.
And probably one thing the pandemic has done, it broadened even the walls of the campus.
Exactly.
And Pat?
I would just say, I say to our students, and there isn't a problem we can't solve, but we have to know about it. So don't feel like you ashamed, or make sure you reach out and let us know what is going on. And please, that's the most important thing, because, we're trying to do our very, very best in navigating uncharted, stormy seas across the globe, because that's what this has been. And it's a pandemic that we haven't seen in 100 years. And, who knows how this is all going to play out. But by reaching out, you're building your own resilience, and, you're showing that in the future, because you've gone through this, you're building your own, flexibility in terms of your life. So make it a positive, as many have said, because that's really, really important. And find hope with the campus community, with each other, and with your faculty.
Thank you very much. I mean, you've made my job trying to summarize everything that you've said a bit challenging, but we've heard lots of great ideas about what your institutions have been doing to support students' well-being. We've heard everything from peer leaders to telecounseling to, using technology, creating really, as Kevin have said, it takes a whole village to get this happening. And I think that, one of the things that, one major takeaway from this, from all what has been said, is that institutions of higher learning will really need to be forward thinking in trying to create a proactive and responsive culture to support students in these difficult times. We'll have to be flexible, we'll have to think out of the box, we'll have to emphasize on communication, and we'll have to work as teams and, not through the job to each other. And I think that's really, very crucial to be able to help our students, throughout these difficult times. With this, I think that we've almost reached to the end of our panel. May I take this opportunity to thank our esteemed panelists for their outstanding insight. And I also would like to take this opportunity to wish Dr. Kevin Kerger formally a very, very happy birthday. It is his birthday today, and he has actually given us some of his personal time. Happy birthday, and many, many more happy years to come. I also would like to thank our wonderful participants for their commitment, for their valuable insights and questions, and wish all of you who are celebrating a Merry Christmas. And as this challenging year of 2020 is coming to an end, may I also wish everyone a healthy, peaceful, successful, and COVID-free 2021. Stay safe, and see you all in 2021 for season 3 of In Conversation with Clicks. Thank you very much.
Thanks, it was a pleasure.
Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. Happy birthday once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Everyone. Bye.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Pleasure meeting all of you.